Yeah. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay, Fia wanted to point out the option of wrist modifications in downward dog. Fia, are you there?
I think she left, but earlier when we were talking about down dog, I think she was just trying to say instead of using your wrist, just get onto your forearm as an alternate.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you. I got you. Thank you. Um, okay, so somebody asked about reverse prayer. Again, I tell especially men to not to bring their fists together because sometimes reverse prayer is so inaccessible that if you just bring your fists together, you can still achieve the same effect without torquing the wrist or hyperextending in the shoulders. So hands and arm balances. So I've seen people lifting their knuckles instead of placing their entire fingers on the floor. Could you explain what's safe for the wrist and what's not? So if Carrie's still around, I'm gonna actually bring Carrie into this conversation because I tend to press into the base of my knuckles, but these little guys lift up a little bit. I sort of have like a spider hands a little bit. And I don't know that that's right or wrong. Carrie, what are your thoughts on this?
So what exactly is the question? Did she say?
What about hands and arm balances? I've seen people lifting their knuckles instead of placing their entire fingers on the floor. What's safe, what's not for the wrist?
Well, I mean, this coming from Circus Soleil. All right. So, I mean, it's probably one of those controversial, type of things. But if you think about it like this, so the bone is the strongest part of the body, and you want to have bone stacking to be the strongest in most yoga poses, right? So it doesn't make sense to break the energy line, and B, to bend the knuckle and to have the knuckles lifting, because the bone, you're not as strong, right? So my circus coach taught me to have very flat hands and flat fingers, and to press into the ball of the hand. The gripping, like if you guys right now put your hands on the table or wherever in front of you, and you press down into the ball of your hand with straight fingers, okay? And then bend your hands and press into your fingers. Don't you feel more stress on your tendons and
Well,
your leg in your wrists?
I don't feel as stable.
Right, you're not as stable, and you're also because you're using your fingers, so your fingers don't have muscles. Your forearms have muscles that operate your fingers. So when you're bending your fingers, you're actually, using your forearm muscles, which, like, why? So you don't need to, you're just making it harder. So I think sometimes when people bend their fingers and they pull up and whatnot, because they're kind of using their forearms more, maybe to them it feels more solid. But long term, which is what we're always trying to do, is long term, we want to practice yoga for the rest of our lives. You should probably just train with your hands flat, to save the ligaments in the forearms.
Cool. Thanks, Carrie. I had done some research last year about, I was on a handstand quest and then I was like, forget it, I'm over it. But when I was doing my research, again, I sort of, because I had talked to Carrie previously, I was looking at people who were like gymnasts and stuff like that, so I was looking at YouTubes of not yogis, but like gymnasts and acrobats and stuff like that. And they said, what I think they said, and I don't want to quote them exactly, but that one of the common mistakes is lifting those knuckles, because then you can't distribute the weight evenly in the hands through the fingers, like even through the fingers, even though they're not doing anything, that helps to, when you put all the weight in the wrist, I think is what they were saying, that it's not as stable. You're not going to be able to balance. So it was something like that. So I think
yeah. Well, so your fingertips are like a break, and the heel of your hand is like a break. And so you want to eventually, I mean, we're talking like handstands, and I guess for most arm balances, it's the same, but you want to get your weight centered over the ball of your hand, and you don't want to actually use your fingers or the heel of your hand, because if you're using your fingers or the heel of your hand, you're out of balance.
Okay.
So when you bend your knuckles like that, you're pressing more into your fingers, trying to use your fingers to balance. So,
Okay.
you know, I always say, like, hey, if you like it and you're doing it and, you know, it works for you, then that's great. I mean, I know people who, you know, they do these like fingertip handstands and things, which is to me really reckless, because you're balancing in your ligaments, which is silly. But, you know, something like that, I don't think it's a make or break thing. I just think that, you know, long term, it makes more sense to always try and stack the bones whenever you can.
Sure, sure. Thanks, guys. No, I definitely agree. I think that I have found that I just, well, there's two things I want to say about this that are coming up. I see a lot of people, and I'm going to say myself included, who when they started in arm balances and doing arm balances, I can do every arm balance that there is, but I started by muscling through it. And that's not the safest way to start, you know? So I put myself into positions and postures where I look back at pictures and I'm like, I wasn't being safe in my shoulders. I wasn't being safe in my wrist. So when you develop like a technique that is, you know, stronger, stable, that is what's going to be the technique that'll take you through the practice for life. So definitely looking, you know, it's always an interesting experiment to like, okay, so we're having this conversation. So everybody, you know, get off the call today and just do cat-cow, you know, one with your hands flat on the ground, pushing all 10 fingers into the ground so that everything's flat. And then do cat-cow with the knuckles bent. So see what you think. Cat-cow is an arm balance, right? I mean, it doesn't have a lot of gravity behind it, but it's the same concept, right?
A thought on that. Can you talk about the Hasta Bandha then in relation to the arm balances? Because I'm having a hard time visualizing the kind of cup effect that you have under the palm with balancing the weight.
So when you're engaging Hasta Bandha, so think downward dog is like a really good one, and Dandasana is another really good one that has all of the bandhas in it. So Dandasana, seated staff pose, where the hands are down. Now, not everybody can put the hands down, but if they're down and they're on the floor and they're flush with the floor, they're supposed to be in Hasta Bandha, okay? And what that means is I'm pressing into all four corners of the hands, and you're gonna feel a little lift just right here. It's super slight. It's not as pronounced as the lift that you feel in Pada Bandha. Pada Bandha is like, whoa, I feel that, right? Hasta Bandha is a little bit more slight. But what's really interesting, and I love the external bandhas. They're called the external locks because they're what we use to learn how to use our body for locomotion. So the first one that develops is Hasta Bandha. And that's when you're crawling, okay? And so you're crawling. Now remember, babies' hands are like this, right? And so they have to open up like little flowers before they can start to crawl. And they can't crawl with fists. They have to open up like little flowers, and then they crawl, and then they start gripping on things, and they're gripping and, you know, holding things, but they're so tight that they don't have that dexterity yet, right? And so they have to develop the dexterity until they get to the point where they can pull themselves up. And that's when Pada Bandha starts to develop. And what's really cool is when Pada Bandha starts to develop, they start toddling around and their little bellies are all hanging out. We've all seen this, right? Little baby bellies hanging out. That's because they don't have Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha yet. So once they develop Pada Bandha and they stop falling over, it's almost like overnight. For those of you who have kids, remember they toddled around and they had a big belly, and then overnight they held it all together. And it so coincides with them being potty trained, because then they learn how to control those internal locks. And then they learn how to control Uddiyana Bandha, and it all sort of comes on naturally. That's why I really think yoga is the ancient wisdom that is written in the cellular DNA of our body. And we're just uncovering it and putting words to things that our body already knows already, right? So that's what I find really fascinating about it. And then, you know, again, I think it's sort of metaphysical and physical, but you know, toddlers are asking all these questions. They're so excited. Jalahara Bandha's open, man. They are vocal, right? And then as they start to grow and develop, they start to learn how to contain that Jalahara Bandha. And they start to learn how to, then as parents, we teach discernment. So really it's like parenting is teaching yoga from birth until the beyond. So that's the way I like to look at it. So awesome. All right. Any other questions? Oh, so could you comment on using fist and poses when you are weight bearing on hand? So the reason that people do that, the reason that you would use your fist in plank pose, for example, or your fist in downward dog, is to reduce the flexion in the wrist. That's what you're doing. You're removing the flexion in the wrist. And because what happens with carpal tunnel, if I sit here at my computer, I'll just let you see my hands. If I sit here and my hands are not supported, my wrists are not supported, then I, over time, will probably get carpal tunnel. But if I support my wrist and I sit and I type like this, then my wrists are going to be supported, so that carpal tunnel nerve will probably not get inflamed or irritated with me, so I don't have to worry about it. So what's the difference? And Christina will talk about this tomorrow. So what changed? What changed is the angle of flexion in my wrist.
Michelle, I have a question about child's pose.
Sure.
Can people feel pain in their low back?
Absolutely. And you know why? Most likely it's SI dysfunction or SI inflammation. So here we go. We're back. So here is my pelvis. This is my sacrum, okay? The sacrum has two joints, one on either side, SI, SI. It's easier, I think, to look at it from this angle, right? So this is my sacrum right here. This is the SI joint here, and this is the SI joint here. So they're sliding joints. They move a little bit, but they're not super mobile like your elbow or your knee or hip or your arm, right? And so what happens is people, again, it's postural. Like people will walk in a certain way, or they'll lean to a certain side, or they'll do something like that that causes their SI joint to be inflamed, and that causes pain. Or they will be hypermobile and they will have hypermobility in the SI, which is oftentimes called SI dysfunction, where it's not functioning properly because it's too mobile. So this is sort of like what you see when people say, I have pain in my low back in child's pose, and the solution is to bring the legs together. When you bring the legs together, you provide support for the low back. So I typically cue it like this. This is what I say. I say, okay, we're gonna come into child's pose. You can bring your big toes together. Your knees can be slightly apart. If you have any sensitivity in the low back, you can bring your legs together to support the low back. So I'm educating them as to why I'm telling them to do what I'm telling them to do, so that when they go to another class and maybe another teacher doesn't cue it that way, they know what to do.
Hey, Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah, I experienced this in Happy Baby. Is this similar?
Yes, yes. So, and again, so we talk about, we either are in neutral or external rotation in most of our yoga poses. So what is Happy Baby? It's external rotation. And external rotation will oftentimes exacerbate SI dysfunction or SI inflammation. Why? Because the femur head is like imagine that here's my pelvis, okay? Like imagine that these are femurs and my pelvis is sitting on top of the femur, right? When I'm neutral, this is how my orientation is. When I'm externally rotated, this is how my orientation is, right? And so then I go into a lunge and I start pushing that force of that lunge into the SI. Does that make sense? So you're on your back, you're in Happy Baby, your hands are pulling your femur heads into the acetabulum and putting pressure on your SI. Does that sound like what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Does one side hurt more than the other?
No, it's really mostly just low back pain, right in the middle, right at the near the sacrum.
Yep. So I would say that there's probably something going on. Again, not a chiropractor, not a doctor. You can modify your practice. I would, instead of letting your legs go wide in Happy Baby, I would let them be pretty neutral. Or maybe you even skip Happy Baby and you do, what is it called? Apanasana. Do you know that one? Here, let me show you. Apanasana is an alternative to Happy Baby. Now, the purpose of these poses is to help move your digestion, like to help to move any sort of wind in the colon, okay? So that's what Happy Baby and Apanasana are supposed to do. They're supposed to make you choose. I just want to let you know that sometimes your students might have a little bit of a wind release, and that's okay. So here, you're in your back. Apanasana, you put your hands on your knees. When you inhale, you push your knees away. When you exhale, you bring your knees in, or vice versa. It depends on if you're doing it oh, you can't see me. Sorry, guys. I keep doing that today. I'm not really with the technology. Okay. So, all right. So here we are. Apanasana. My legs are together, so I'm in a neutral orientation. My hands are on my knees. Inhale, push away. Exhale, bring in. Inhale, push away. Exhale, bring in. This is Brahmana Apanasana. If I wanted to do Lungana Apanasana, so maybe I'm trying to get myself ready for Shavasana, then I'm going to inhale, pull back. Exhale, push forward. Inhale. Exhale. So that's an alternative to Happy Baby, where you're in external rotation and you're really putting a lot more pressure on the sacrum. All righty.
Michelle, I just wanted to add to what you said, if that was okay, that I think that's a really interesting pose as an alternative also for maybe trauma-informed class or trauma-sensitive class. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are a lot of poses I avoid when I teach trauma-informed yoga. So I would avoid poses like Happy Baby. I even sometimes avoid, well, I definitely avoid Supta Baddha Konasana. Soles of the feet together on your back. It's just very vulnerable. It's a very exposed pose. Oftentimes I will offer, if I'm teaching trauma informed, I'll offer blankets for Shavasana, or I'll give an alternative for people to come to a seat in Shavasana, because sometimes Shavasana can be very vulnerable, right? Child's pose can even be very vulnerable because your head's down and you can't see what's going around in the room, right? So just remember that, to be quite honest, any pose at all could be activating, right? We don't know what people have gone through. So we just have to be careful. And, languaging is one of the most important things when it comes to trauma informed, because you want to make sure your languaging is inclusive, and you want to make sure that you're not saying things that are activating, right? So it can be challenging for some teachers to teach trauma informed because it is really projection free. There is a teacher here in Austin, and she's a friend of mine. She's a trauma informed teacher. I've been to her classes. I really like her as a person. The way she holds space and the way she talks sounds very militant to me. Like she sort of like is barking the whole time. Like, this is exactly what she said. She said, "Hi, my name is X. We're going to be having class for the next 60 minutes. I'm going to ask you to do X, Y, and Z. These are just suggestions." Like, this is the way she's talking, right? She's not talking really soft and, And then at the end, she says, "At the end of the class, we will go into Shavasana. For the safety of yourself and everyone around you, I ask that you stay on your mat." And to me, that's like really shocking. It's like, the safety? I've got to like, what are this doing? So languaging is so important, because you can say that. Typically what I say is, at the end of class, we have Shavasana. It's a time for integration. We ask that everybody remain on their mat until I bring you out of Shavasana. up. That's all I say. I don't need to bring up safety or like any of that stuff because it can be quite activating for people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So psoas in relation to, oh, I lost it. Poses in relation to psoas, it can affect flexibility and movement a great deal. How would you deal with the tight psoas? So the psoas muscle, in fact, if we have any massage therapist on here, there's great debate around the psoas muscle. And, you know, Leslie Kamenoff teaches that there's really one psoas muscle with two parts. And some people teach that there's psoas major and psoas minor. So there's a lot of debate even in like the academic world about like the psoas and functionality of the psoas and how it relates to the SI and tight psoas versus weak psoas versus XYZ. What I do know is that people who have hypertonic pelvic floors, okay, so that's somebody, so most of us will experience people coming to our classes and they might have hypotonic pelvic floors. They're having, you know, a little bit of bladder leakage, or maybe they're, you know, they're not having as much tone in their pelvic floor. That's what I see most of, like commonly. But then every once in a while, I'll get a hypertonic. I'm working with somebody right now in yoga therapy, and she has hypertonic pelvic floor, and it causes a lot of problems and is directly related to the psoas. So she's constantly trying to relax the psoas. But from what I've talked to with like some massage therapists have the opinion that you shouldn't mess with the psoas at all. So it's a hard question for me to answer because I know the psoas as it relates to yoga, and a massage therapist understands the psoas as it relates to the structure and integrity of the core, because the psoas is part of those core muscles, those deep core muscles. But I think for me, poses like supported fish, again with something, you know, so we're opening the chest and then we open the hips at the same time. That's going to help encourage the psoas to release, right? So maybe a reclined Supta Baddha Konasana with a very, very gentle supported fish, maybe a blanket roll underneath the back, something like that. Warrior 2 is going to really work the psoas. So if you already have a tight psoas, Warrior 2, getting into it and taking a long stance, it may be challenging or it may be extremely intense for people with a tight psoas. So you might want to, you know, offer them to shorten it. You know, you can always shorten your stance a little bit, especially if it's like not bearable. So yeah, that's what I would say. Is there anybody who's a massage therapist that wants to hop on that psoas bandwagon? Okay, so beyond SI dysfunction, is low back pain in hip femoral external rotation also related to psoas tightness? I would not say hip. You'd have to show me where it is. This is Max. So Max, is it in the front of your hip? Is it the outside of your hip, or is it behind your hip?
I don't know. We were just talking about earlier how some people experience low back pain in child's pose and in happy baby. And I was wondering, beyond just the SI dysfunction as maybe being a cause for low back pain, is there any relation to psoas tightness, since it does connect to your lumbar spine, and as you externally rotate your thigh bones with the psoas insertion point at the top of the femoral head, do you cause any additional strain on the psoas muscle that could also pull on the lumbar spine and therefore cause back pain?
Sure.
That might not be related to SI joint, but it's kind of in the same spot.
So I think it all is related to each other. I think it's related to SI. I think it's related to external rotation, and it's part of why there's contribution to SI pain or SI discomfort in these externally rotated postures. I get a lot of people who will say things to me like, Warrior 2 is really uncomfortable for me, or triangle is really uncomfortable for me. So I do think they're related. Typically, when somebody tells me that the front of their body like the front of their body is hurting, like in like a diagonal from the top of their iliac crest down towards their pubic bone, that indicates there's like tightness in the psoas. If they have like tightness right there, and that's what they're bringing up to me. But I think it's all connected. So I think you're right on. So as a counselor, I'm super excited that trauma has been mentioned throughout the class. Yay, I'm so glad. Should glutes be active or relaxed in flat bends? Oh my gosh, so this is like one of the biggest debates in, this is one of the biggest debates in our sort of like yoga culture. And I know two teachers in town. One of them is my teacher and the other is a friend of hers. And my teacher says relax the glutes and this other teacher says engage the glutes. So what I'm gonna go with is engage the glutes. So, and this is why, because the glutes, from what I feel in my body, when my glutes are engaged in a back bend like Dhanurasana or even bridge pose, and I have that engagement, I feel safer in my low back, okay? So if you have an opposite experience, if it contributes to low back pain, then try to soften them. But in my experience, I can't soften them. I can't really get them to relax. And I don't know how. This is why I don't agree with my teacher. I don't know how you can relax your glutes and be in a back bend. Has anybody experienced this?
I did. I was a teacher, an Ashtanga teacher told me, because I think I active them too much. So then that caused pain in my lower back, because I think it put a lot of pressure on my sacrum. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to soften them a bit and I started feeling it more in my thoracic spine, which felt much better.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
One I could add to a little bit. When I was told also to like kind of relax your glutes early on in my teaching and yoga practicing, but a teacher recently kind of explained it's not about disengaging your glutes, it's about kind of engaging the right glute muscles.
Okay.
So he taught like pressing down through your heels and tractioning the heels outward, turn on a bit of external rotation through the thigh bones and these outer glute muscles. Because what happens is when we say engage our glutes to our students, they think squeeze your glutes. And when you squeeze your glutes, then you kind of cinch the low back muscles, which causes strain in the low back. So what I was recently corrected was it's not about like disengaging the glutes and letting them be kind of flabby, but it's about kind of more pinpointed engagement of those glute muscles.
Cool, Max. Thank you so much. That makes a lot more sense to me than relax the glutes. Because when I'm not clenching my glutes in Urdhva Dhanurasana, but my glutes are engaged and I have engagement. And you know what? What is Urdhva Dhanurasana? Urdhva Dhanurasana is extension of the hip flexors. Well, how do we get into extension? The hip extenders are the glutes and the hamstrings. So if they're not engaged, then you know we're not supporting the extension of the hip flexors the way we need to be. So I would agree with everything we're saying, that it's not so much about relaxing the glutes and having them completely offline. It's more about knowing how to activate them in a way that supports the low back and takes it out of the lumbar spine and puts it back into the thoracic spine. Because back bends are thoracic, they're never lumbar, right?
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Okay, so earlier when you said that headstand assist seat made your neck muscles lock up, how would you tell your students to release that if it happened to them or prevent it? Honestly, I had to go to the doctor. It happened to me 3 times and I was like literally the first 2 times it took like a week for it to get, and I salt bath and I like heat, I mean like I did everything and I just couldn't get it to let go. And then the 3rd time it happened, I was about to get on a plane to go to Ireland and it happened and I was like, I cannot travel like this. So I had to go to the doctor and they gave me a really hard time. And I was like, look, I can't turn my head at all to the left. Like I've got to do something. So it's really, yeah, I think either time or medical intervention are the only 2 things that you can do about that. What are the visual signs that we can observe in our students with psoas tightness? What does it look like? I would say when they lean forward. So let me show you. So if I'm in warrior 2, I'm gonna know that something's going on if they look like this. The warrior 2 looks like. So the knee's not stacking over the ankle, and then my torso is falling forward. This warrior 2 is not what we're looking for. And this tells me they're compensating for tightness, okay? So how do I get them there? So I say stack the knee over the ankle, pull the shoulder back. Holy moly, that's a whole different thing, right? And so that automatically turns on. Psoas is now involved, the quads are involved, the glutes are involved, everything's working. And so it's a totally different pose. So what I look for is people, not to say half-assing, but I look for people who aren't really like in the pose to let me know that something's going on. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm just trying to gauge maybe if they're standing or the kind of thing when they're moving, but that helps with warrior 2. I'll have to think through some other poses on how I try to recognize it.
Another thing that you'll see is if they're seated, they're gonna, when the psoas, so let's go back to the ergonomics. And like I said, Christina is gonna talk about this tomorrow, but when you're seated at a desk all day and you're locked long in the back of your body, the front of your body is shortened. Well, even though the psoas attaches to the lumbar spine and the femur, so the psoas actually attaches to the femur and the lumbar spine. So even though those are inside, those are deep core muscles. So the psoas is a deep core muscle. It's in that sort of category. So if I am walking around like this and I'm standing like this and I'm sitting like this on my mat, then that's also an indication that I have a tight psoas.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that helps. I think I'm pretty flexible, so it occurred to me that when you said that comment about the pain, or maybe like a tenderness, I guess, from the like in your lower pelvis, even though I consider myself pretty flexible and hypermobile in some of my joints, that might still be an issue. And so then I'm trying to figure out how to recognize it in other students who you wouldn't necessarily assume that's an issue for, but because of the lifestyle we have, that maybe most people have a tight psoas even if they're super flexible.
Yeah, there are several articles out there on this topic. You know, I always want to send you guys back to like the source, right? You know, rather than when you guys are doing research, and I just want to throw this out there because, you know, it's important that I teach you guys how to do credible research so that you can become you know, better yoga teachers as you continue to move through your yoga career. Always go back to the source. So if you were trained by somebody in your 200-hour training and they always went back to whatever their lineage is, maybe it's Ashtanga, or maybe it's Hatha Yoga, or maybe it's, you know, even Bikram, like it doesn't matter to me what the lineage is, you know, I'm not concerned with that. But if you're teaching in a lineage, you go back to the source of that lineage. So for us, that's why we go back to Hatha Yoga, BKS Iyengar, or Patabi Joyce, or Desikachar to like check in with that. And then if I can't find anything that they've written on the psoas, for example, then I'm going to go to modern teachers that have studied with them. So the teachers who have studied with Desikachar, BKS Iyengar, and Patabi Joyce that are in our lineage are Leslie Kaminoff. Leslie Kaminoff would be the top dead ringer I would send you to. Now, the teaching style is interesting. You know, he teaches, he's a wonderful teacher, but his teaching style for some people is a little bit obscure, but he is notable and he's right on and he understands the anatomy of yoga. So Leslie Kaminoff would be the first person I would send you to. And then after Leslie, I would have you watch like videos of Mahdi Isradi. You know, Patabi Joyce did not care about the psoas. All he wanted you to do was keep your energy in alignment. Like the whole purpose of Ashtanga was to give householders the 8-limbed path of yoga, so that householders could practice 8 limbs of yoga in an hour and a half a day. So that's like the purpose of Ashtanga. And so Patabi wasn't really worried about alignment. In fact, if you watch videos of him teaching in India, people are flip-flopping around their mats like fishies. I mean, like, there's no like alignment there. It's just like they're going through the motions. And that was sort of how that teaching style was. But like, then if you look at teachers that are more modern, Annie Carpenter is a good one. The only problem I have with Annie Carpenter is her understanding of internal, external, neutral rotation. So Annie Carpenter is my teacher's teacher. And I typically don't send people to her to like look at alignment or look at like anatomy because of the way she talks about it. She talks about internal rotation, external rotation as movements, and I talk about them as orientations of the bone. Does that make sense? And so right there, we're not speaking the same language. She's talking about them as movements. So she actually lumps internal rotation. So in Annie's system, there are like 13 movement principles, and one of them is external rotation. One of them is neutral pelvis. The other one is, let's see, external rotation, neutral pelvis, and then she does internal rotation. She does Pada Bandha. She does something with the shoulder. So there's a bunch of different buckets. And for me, it was just like, first of all, I didn't want to copy somebody's thing. And second of all, it was just confusing. It seemed like it was too many things for somebody to be able to take and learn how to teach from their knowledge of anatomy through sequencing. So I sequence very similar to Annie, and the principles are the same, but the language is different. That's why I'm telling you guys this. So just so you know. But I would go, like I said, Leslie Kaminoff. My yoga therapy was with Brian Dorfman. If you guys have ever heard of Brian Dorfman, he is, I think he's a physical therapist, yoga therapist in California, but he definitely has the credentials. So those are the places that I would send you if you want more. What I caution people about when it comes to research is reading things like Yoga Journal. Yoga Journal does not have accurate information. It's not even consistent across the board. And I don't know if everybody understands the way that these magazines work, but anyone, including me, could write an article, pay them $6,000, and my article would be in the magazine. But I've just paid them $6,000. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's vetted. It's not like it's been researched and backed, etc. So I caution people about going to secondary and tertiary sources. Like, try as many times as you can to go back to the source, the primary source, if you can. What now? Okay, so I teach the difference between engaging and bracing or squeezing. That's great, Erica. Would you ever recommend the use of a tremor to release the hips, abdominal? Actually, yes. So, and I don't know if you and I are talking about the same thing. This is Jess Jones, if you want to pop on real fast. Jess says, would you ever recommend the use of a trimmer to release hips, abdominals, or leg muscles before going into a deep stretch like pigeon? Could this help in injury prevention? Naturally occurs. So trimmers sometimes do naturally occur. What we also can liken that to is progressive muscle relaxation. So, and then there's a book, and I'll have to, I don't have it handy right now, but it's called, I don't know. Hold on, let me get my husband. Hey, Chris, can you grab me the blue book in there on trauma? It's on my desk. Maybe he's still here. There's a technique where you basically take your feet and you put your feet together in Supta Konasana, and you slowly bring your knees up, 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 and you build the tremor. You build it. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have. A lot of it. There's like in Fitzmaurice, there's a whole technique where you have the pillow under your sacrum, and then you have your legs back.
Yeah.
And pull them up, and that's where I've usually found it.
Oh yeah. So he brought us the books so that we I can give you some actual resources here.
Awesome. Thank you.
I use these in trauma. So when I teach trauma-informed yoga, I'm actually going to teach it on a Zoom weekend. It's a lot different than I teach it in this 300-hour. There's more information when I teach it like this than there is when I put it online. But this is the book that we use, and it is amazing. So inside there are all of these different activities and, postures and ways that you can, work with the body to help the body to release. And some of this goes hand in hand with somatic therapy. So, we hold our traumas in the somatic tissue of the body. And so sometimes when we can use these techniques to encourage the muscles to fire and then let go, we can release some of that stuff. So yeah, I think that's great. I've done that a couple times in class too.
Awesome.
Hey, Michelle.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you, side question, but do you have like a list on Amazon or something of the books that you read as a recommendation for readings you can share?
Well, actually, since you ask.
I know I love Amazon a little too much.
So this last week was a super busy week for us. Obviously, you guys saw the message I put out. So in the midst of, like all the different things that we were sort of like trying to balance, we've also been finishing up all of our paperwork for IAYT, the International Association of Yoga Therapy. So our yoga therapy program is about to be fully accredited with them. And one of the things they wanted a student handbook that had a list of all of the student resources. So we now have that. If you want to know all of the books that, I read or that we use in yoga therapy training, then you can just reach out and we'll give you that. Even though you're not in yoga therapy, you can have that list. It's fine. I will tell you all, since we're on the call, there's a specific person you're going to reach out to. Her name is Tara Reyna. And so if you reach out to like the mentor box, we're just going to forward your email to Tara Reyna because she's the one who's helping us to organize all the documents. At some point in the very near future, we will have a link to a shared folder where you guys can access all of these documents whenever you want. So it will literally have every document we use and every training, everything. All righty. Okie dokie. Let's see. When I go from up dog to down dog, I feel some pressure in my sacrum. Is it okay to briefly touch the knees off the floor to help with pushing up? Okay, so this is Siobhan?
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
So yeah, when you're in like proper up dog where you're, you're only balancing on your hands and the tops of your feet, and then you have to push yourself up while turning your feet back under to get your sacrum high, back into down dog. I just find because you don't have much to push yourself up with other than your hands and just the tops of the feet, that I feel some strain in the lower back.
Sure. I mean, I think you can, if does it feel better when you put your knees down?
Yeah.
So do it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Really, we're going for using the quads to push yourself up and back, then you roll over the feet, right? But it sometimes doesn't happen like that. So if you need to put your knees down, I would say support yourself.
Like I can do it, but then I just, over time, I'm concerned I'm going to start. It's kind of almost where the SI joint is. It's like just a bit of a pulling sensation. So I'm not sure whether I'm not engaging my core enough to, get back up.
That's maybe not. Here's another thing that I will tell you. You might, and this is like sort of for everyone, you might consider not doing every sun salutation in class. It's possible, okay? Because, well, there's a couple of reasons. Like, some teachers teach vinyasa classes and there are like 25 Surya Namaskara A's. They start the class with 4 or 5 and then you go through like 4 rounds on each side. So that's 8 more, right? And then you do like a couple rounds at the end. So now we're at like what? Maybe 17, 18 rounds of Surya Namaskara A. I will float back the first 2. And then after that, I step back the next 2 or 3. And then after that, I skip them. Just for wear and tear on my body, right? Because over time, if we do anything too much, it's going to cause problems. So I sort of listen to my body on that one.
So a part of this challenge of I think her name is Rachel Brethren of Yoga Girl. So she'll do like 108 sun salutation every New Year's. That sounds like a lot. I know why 108, but still, I've heard that they call it shoulder shredder, right?
Oh God. So I haven't seen her do it. So there's a couple things I would say about that. We're about to have one actually too. We're doing 108 for the summer solstice. And we're going to do it outside. And obviously, if you get tired, take child's pose, not a big deal. But I don't like people to hop back. Okay. So if you are floating back, you're floating back into chaturanga and there's almost no sound. But if you're hopping back, you're usually hopping back with straight arms, and that can cause problems in the shoulder girdle. And then over time, yes, that will shred your shoulders. That's exactly right. Right. So what I encourage people to do, or how I encourage people to teach, is I encourage you to say, step back or float. Now, you say these things, and then people are going to do whatever they want anyway, right? So, like, if I say step back or float, there's going to be a guy over in the corner that's like, I'm going to push it to the limit. I'm going to hop back burpee style every single time, and there's nothing I can do about that. Because, again, my goal is to see and hear and to connect with people, not to shame or call them out. I can always ask him how his shoulders feel after class. And if he tells me my shoulders feel great, I don't know, it's awesome, I'm like, okay. I can't assume that I know his body better than he does, right? That said, the way I contain that energy is I switch it up on them. I do things like, step back, side plank, and they're like, oh man, like it sort of keeps them on their toes, but I keep them from doing these same repetitive motions over and over and again. When it comes to the 108 thing, I think that I don't mind doing it once a year, or even twice a year, but I would again recommend, if you have floating back into chaturanga, you only do it a couple times, and then after that you're stepping back. And then maybe you're stepping back, holding plank, and going to down dog. Maybe you skip the chaturanga after like round 20. You know what I'm saying? You can build a lot of strength and a lot of heat in plank. And so it can be a really effective tool and a great way to modify when you're doing stuff like that. Yeah, and it might even be something that this is like an opportunity for a conversation. Like when we have our 108 class next week, I might have Jess say, hey guys, this can be a lot on your shoulders. Here are some ways you can modify once we get going. You know what I'm saying? So you're giving them the tools again to empower themselves to take care of their bodies. Awesome.
Thank you.
Great question.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, ma'am.
I led one of those this last year for my students wanted to do 108. They asked me to lead it for them, so we did it. And I sat down beforehand and wrote down as many different ways of not lifting the arms up, because I was like, that's what's going to give, right? So even if you've got your hands in prayer, you bring them up to your forehead and like straight down the middle. It's really meditative. It's a lot easier on the shoulders. And then it was like, definitely, I basically asked them not to do a full chaturanga the whole time. Knees down, cat cows, anything else. But 108 is mean, even on a very fit person. And I wanted them to come to yoga the next day and not have torn up shoulders for a week.
Yeah.
So if you're going to lead one, like there's so many different ways that you can fold without taking your shoulders up, without jumping back and stuff. So kind of be inventive and tell them beforehand. And then I modified every single one, so I was leading by example. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love that. And I love that you really thought it through. I mean, we all sometimes do things without like really thinking it through, and that's part of the learning, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but this conversation shows that you can still do things but be safe and offer safe modifications. But then at the end of the day, let me ask you, were there people who still did 108?
I think we all did the 108, but we modified in different, we did like however many rounds. I had my beads and I was doing rounds, and a few maybe skipped a few rounds, took child's pose for a few, and we took good breaks in the middle and stuff, but we all managed it. We all stuck together and we're all really comfortable with it. So it wasn't like full sun A's, but it still counts. You're in the room, you're breathing. It was like really sweet. So.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So can you demo healthy transitions into side plank and supported side plank? This is a little bit of a sequencing question as well as strong weight distribution in side plank. Okay, so yes, Valerie asked, so I use side plank as a transitionary pose. That's what I use it for. And so if I, like, let's say I'm in warrior one, I do this sometimes. So I'm in warrior one, plant the palms, step the right foot back, side plank, right? Or I would be warrior one, now I frame the foot, and then I turn all 10 toes towards the right. This is another version. Another way to do it is now I'm in a low lunge, so I just come from warrior one, drop the left knee, extend the right leg, side plank. So there's 3 different ways to do it. I find that the last one I showed you is supportive, but it's challenging. It's super challenging because like to find that balance with the knee down. But some people like it more than the supported side plank where you turn your whole body to the opposite side. Does that make sense? That second one I showed you? Some people don't like that because it puts too much pressure on their ankle. So these are the 3 options I give. All right, guys. Well, I hope that this was helpful. Did you guys find this helpful?
Oh, tremendously. You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, well, tomorrow will be very different. I love Christine. She's one of my best friends, but we are totally different teachers. So she's coming in and she's going to teach you guys a completely different lecture tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be all about working with corporate clients and working with corporate clients to improve the ergonomics of their day-to-day life and how yoga can be used for that. So super, super informative information. She will definitely have a PowerPoint. I do not. And she'll be here tomorrow morning at 9, okay? And we're also gonna try to make sure that there's not a cap on Zoom. I thought we had taken care of that this week, but sorry for that. This has been recorded and we'll make sure it gets posted on the Google Sheets ASAP, okay?
Thank you.
Guys, have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions that
Thank you.
you want to stay on longer, I'll stay for a few minutes and answer questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Michelle, can I ask a quick question?
Ma'am.
When we log on to these pre-recorded Zoom sessions or like the live one, does it show up on your end, or are we just keeping a written tally of that?
Sure.
Ourselves?
If you registered before June 1st, you do not need to log your Zoom classes. If you registered after June 1st, we've provided you with a log. So
Okay,
really the reason that we did that wasn't to make more work, but the expectation was always that people would watch those, right? Mm-hmm. But we decided that we wanted to give people scaffolding. People were asking questions like, do I log my hours? What does that look like? Where should I put that? Should I give it to you at the end? And we were like, okay, they want more structure. But we obviously realized that if people, you know, registered for the class in May, they didn't have that structure. They started going. I'm not going to penalize them because we changed something, right? So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. And I'm keeping track on the log anyways, just for
Yep,
my
same.
mental status. Okay, thank you.
It's very helpful. The log is very good. I like it.
Michelle, real quick, this is Kelly. Going back to what you were talking about earlier on my mind just went blank trying to get in here and ask a question. The yoga therapy for the weekend where you have the YTs on the calendar that you put out, is that only for YTs?
No, so while this is going on, we are letting you guys come into everything.
Okay, great.
And we're actually getting a lot of people wanting to sign up for that training because Yoga Alliance is much more strict than IAYT in terms of how we can deliver content. So Yoga Alliance says no onlines except for this temporary provision. But International Association of Yoga Therapy is like, we're reasonable people, do online until COVID. So they haven't like said there's a date or anything. So I feel like if my studio is not open and we're offering Zoom, I don't care if it's a year and a half from now, you guys can still come in on Zoom. So for that reason, a lot of people are trying to get into yoga therapy to take advantage of the distance learning option so that they can knock out as many of those modules. Now I will say yoga therapy is a 2-year commitment. It is an advanced training in clinical applications of yoga therapy. And it is fully accredited with IAYT, so that's different than Yoga Alliance. We certify you and then you apply for certification with IAYT. They certify you too, so it's like double certification basically, if that makes sense. Whereas with Yoga Alliance, I certify you and they are a registry, so you just register with them. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit different the way the organizations work. But I would recommend if you're interested in it, you know, have a conversation with us. There are some requirements that you have to meet in order to be eligible. You have to have a 200-hour and you have to have at least 1 year of experience teaching before you can register for yoga therapy. And then if you've taken my 300-hour, you would register for module 2 and 3. You wouldn't have to do module 1 because you've already done the module 1 in the 300-hour. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that answers a lot of my ongoing questions. I just meant on the calendar for the Zooms, like I think it's in 2 weeks, you have like 3 days of yoga therapy trainings on the calendar for Zoom sessions.
Yep.
Those open for 200-hour and 300-hour students as well? Yep. Okay. Yes.
As long as we're doing this, everything's open.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might have missed it. So yoga therapy is only possible with 1 year of teaching experience in the yoga teacher before.
That's technically the issue. That's technically what we say, Nina. But honestly, I mean, I have made exceptions before. So if it's something you're really interested in, let me know. I'm not going to tell people they can't do it. It's a 2-year commitment. So for the love of all that is, you know, good in the world, if you're in the program for 2 years, you will have more than a year experience at the end. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what they were trying. When they started that rule was like when they first started. So it's like 10 years old. And when they started that, there was no time limit on how long a program had to be. So people were racing through those things in like 6 months, a year. My program, I had to go through 2 solid years.
Does the teaching experience has to be like public in person, or can you do live, kind of like how we do Karma hours right now?
Whatever. They aren't specific and they don't ask for like so many hours. Like, so I mean, when I first got certified, I taught 3,000 hours in the first 2 years. But most people, when they first get certified, they teach like, you know, maybe 150, 200 hours the first year. If they're teaching one class, you know, a week and they take vacation and stuff like that, you're only teaching at max 300 classes a year. I mean, not even that. You're, what is it, 50 some odd classes a year, right? If you're teaching one class a week. So they don't have a number of how many you had to
hours, right? Just like
nothing like that. Yeah, the yoga therapy is also different because it's competency-based training, whereas that's the way that training has moved in the professional training world, is to competency-based training, whereas Yoga Alliance uses clock hour training. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're two totally different things. So when you finish yoga therapy training, we say you have 1,000 hours, but you've really spent more like 1,500 to 2,000 because you've worked with clients, you've done case studies, you've done all this work, and we don't have you in my like little room every single hour, right? But with 200-hour, 300-hour Yoga Alliance, we're supposed to be in contact with you the entire time as much as possible, right? So that's the difference in the training styles.
Who would you recommend therapy for? I mean, I guess it depends on that's your dharma, I guess, but
people who want to work with clinical professionals, or people who want to work with like a hybrid of yoga psychology, physiotherapy. Like that's what yoga therapy is, therapy for the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual bodies. So I work with people that have maybe shoulder impingement, but are also dealing with grief, right? Because like Carrie said earlier, what do we do when we protect ourselves? We round, and then our movements change and our postural changes. And then I use Ayurveda to help them find balance through Dhanacharya, and so it's a real mix. And I do use a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy and a little bit of coaching too, just because I have that background. Yeah.
Can you post that somewhere, all that you just said, or summarize on Facebook or something about the yoga therapy, please?
Yeah.
I want to say Michelle has some question on her website when I was looking into it about the clinical therapy stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, any questions you guys have, Anna Pilar just came on as our director, and she is a great resource and would love to talk you through it, and that'll just help her to better understand it, because I'm the one who wrote the program.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Any other questions, guys?
I just wanted to talk to you separately about chatting another time.
Okay, sure.
Or about the spinal thing.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and send me an email, and then I have openings this next week. Just so you guys know, I have about like maybe 10 to 12 openings every week for you guys. This is part of training. You don't pay extra for it. We can Zoom, or we can chat on the phone, or we can do anything that is helpful for you. I've looked at people's alignment on Zoom. We've talked about clearing energetic blockages on Zoom. Like, we've worked through some grief. I mean, like, I can do anything you need. So just,
how do we register with you? Do you have a calendar and we request block of time?
I can tell you right now, it's usually, I have Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and I sometimes do like 12, like I'll go up to 12. So right now, I think I only have 2 meetings next week. Shoot me an email and I'll get you on the calendar. Tell me what time works for you, what day works for you, knowing that I'm Central Daylight Time and I have like 9 to 10 usually available.
So just subject in the email that like block time with Michelle.
That's great. Love it. Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions, guys?
How are things in Austin? Forward or?
I've got a quick one if you don't mind. 2 quick ones.
Oh, yeah. I'm just...
Actually, and I apologize because I think you may have answered one of them while I was fighting with the internet.
No problem.
Well, this is the recorded classes that have already been done. Are we able to log those, or is it only the log?
No, you can log those, Alan. It's totally fine. So again, we weren't given a lot of direction when this whole thing started. So we had to sort of say, okay, what does my in-person look like? And how can I translate that to online, right? It's sort of difficult because when we're in in-person training, you know, I might spend 30, 45 minutes talking about philosophy, and then everybody's coming in with their own personal experiences sharing, right? So that's different than the way we do training online. So the way we did it is we created the foundational material is on Teachable. So all of the stuff that you absolutely need to really know to teach yoga is on Teachable. But you'll notice that it's not like a ton of pre-recorded video hours, you know, it's like, that's not where the content really comes in. It's these weekends where the content really comes in and people are asking questions and people are going back and forth. And so, so that's when we really get to apply this stuff, right? I give you the theory on Teachable, and then we come in here and we start to apply it in conversation, right? So we don't care if you watch the pre-records or if you watch the live Zooms, but the Zooms are super important. Second question, Alan. Did I lose him? I think I lost him. Okay, any other questions?
What is it Tara Reyna, which is different than Tara Clevin, right? The studio manager.
Yes, Tara Reyna is, oh goodness, I'm dyslexic, so I can't ever really like spell her name. I have to look at it. Hold on one second. So Tara Reyna she's in charge of all the documents now, and she's getting all of those organized so that we really do have a system for those. And her email is,
I actually sent. Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah, it actually somehow popped up in my mailbox. So Reyna is just Reyna.
Yes, so it's Tara Reyna, Tarareyna. I mean, the dyslexia is a real thing, guys.
Oh, for sure.
At myvinyasapractice.com.
Thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was nice seeing you.
I just had a brief question. It was regarding the 200 hours. I had first Rachel as my mentor, I believe, and then it changed. So I was just a little bit worried who it was. I've been reading, doing all the practices, everything, the meetings, but I wanted to know who it was so I can start doing the sequencing and those things.
Okay, so have you gotten an email from your mentor yet?
I don't think I had it. I'm gonna look again because I had tons of emails with the school because I just got on vacation.
Sure. Well, take a look, and then if you can't find anything, then reach out to Rachel. She might have kept some. It's possible she kept some that she was already working with.
Okay, and on the 300 hours, how long does it take?
For you to complete it, I mean, typically people take about 6 to 8 weeks is what we're seeing. Oh, it's really encouraging actually, because people are not rushing through. I mean, people are taking the time that they should, and that's about what it's taking.
Okay, because I was very interested in it.
Yeah.
It's great.
You would have time if you did it. If you register now, you have time. I've decided that we're going to stop the promotion on it at the end of June, because at that point, if they don't extend beyond September, it would be really hard for somebody to finish. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, and it would have to be in person, correct, in Austin, if that was the case?
So they're telling us, again, there's been so many things that have gone on, like there's a group, Yoga Alliance has a group for this COVID-19 stuff, and there are a bunch of studio owners that are on the group, and they're telling people some things. Like one studio owner said she's been very vocal and she really wants it to be extended through the end of the year. If they extend it through the end of the year, obviously we will change, you know, our marketing and let everybody, you know, come in when they want. But she said that Yoga Alliance had finally told her that she could stay online through October. But see, they haven't told us that. So we don't really know what's going on, unfortunately.
I emailed them and asked them that I respectfully ask they make it permanent, just because I think it make it more accessible to people. But
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that what they're finding is that you can do legitimate training online. And I don't think they really thought it was possible, but there were enough of us that were sort of ready. I mean, it's not perfect, right? We got thrown into this. We weren't planning on doing this. Obviously,
no one's ready for a pandemic. It's the first in a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting thing, but we're doing it with success, and people are finishing, and they're not finishing overnight. That was another thing. Like, I've really been watching all the schools that are out there and that are doing online trainings, and I've sort of been benchmarking, when do our people graduate versus their people? Like, how quickly are we tracking people versus other people? And we're tracking people in what I think is a moderate conservative way. So people aren't graduating like overnight. For example, we started this in March. We've only had 40 people graduate. Only 40. And we're about to have like 100 and something on Sunday. Like, we're having a huge group graduate, but that's taken all the way. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so we have kept people in it and honest and tracking the way they need to track. Yeah. I think it's great. To be really honest with you, I think some of my online students turn out to be better teachers than some of my in-person students. And the reason is because the online training is so introspective. So basically, you have to do your work. But
exactly.
When I have you guys here, if you were here and you're all friends and everybody's hanging out, the second you leave, you're back in your perspective of reality. You know what I'm saying? But in this training, when you're isolated like this and you have to do your work, it really is a different situation. So I love the online training. What I don't love is not knowing what Yoga Alliance's expectations are and having to make up rules overnight because they're not providing me with that support. So that's been what's really been hard, but I think we've made do. And, you know, I've started realizing that really for the last 4 years, we've been a startup, and now we've taken off the ground. We've like come off the ground. So there will be changes and things will happen. And we just appreciate your flexibility, and we appreciate your, you know, your patience with us. We are always trying to get back to you as soon as possible. We're trying to maintain the integrity of the training, but still make sure that it's accessible. And some of the things that have come up is like the 300-hour manual. Typically in person, we don't do that because we have a 500-hour manual and it has all of the content you would need to refer to. And then we bring in books, you know, like we're talking about, and we do it differently, right? But when you scale it online, you have to think about the people who have dyslexia like me or ADHD or whatever, and they can't read on a screen. So we were working our butt off last week just to get that 300-hour manual out so that people had access to printed materials if they wanted it, that they didn't have to go on Amazon and buy something. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it's so helpful to have everything in one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all been an interesting experience, guys. And we love each and every one of you. It's been so much fun to watch you guys help each other. And like, I'm not in all of the little spin-off groups, but I'm in a couple of them. And it's really so sweet to see everybody lifting each other up. I mean, it's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to uplift collective consciousness. That's it. And that's what we're doing. And it's really cool. Any other questions?
So for the 500 hour group, if they want to have everybody offline by October, does that mean then that we need to be completely finished by then if they don't extend it to the end of the year?
Yeah, so what we're wanting is we want you guys to be done with the Teachable platform, okay? So what does that mean? So basically, like I said, we didn't get any direction. Like, they didn't say you have to have this many pre-records, this many live, this many blah, blah. They didn't say that. They said, these are the types of learning we will accept, everything. They said literally everything. And we said, okay, great. So they said all online content counts for contact hours during this COVID-19. So I interpret that as you need to have the teachable platform and all of the deliverables that would fall under the teachable platform turned in. If you are still working on your practicum, you would have been working on that independently if you were in the 300-hour here in Austin, right? I wouldn't be with you practice teaching. You would work on that and then you would turn in your practicum to me. So that's fine. We really want you done with the content curriculum, and we want to have that September 30th date on that so that we can say, okay, yep, she finished the contact hours. Now she's just finishing her practicum. And I think that gives us a leg to stand on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And if that happens, Mackenzie, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, Mackenzie finished the teachable platform on September 29th. That's the date that she's going to get on her certificate. If you turn in the practicum October 15th, it doesn't matter. You're going to get that date on your certificate because that's when you finish the program. Your practicum is what is like our last deliverable.
Okay, awesome. That makes complete sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Me just thought give us an opportunity to keep you up here.
Oh yeah, well my husband just went to the grocery store, so I have nothing to do, so I'm happy. Fine.
I saw his shirt say Dunder Mifflin. I wanted to say something about it, but I couldn't. I didn't.
One of his Christmas presents this year, so yeah.
Hi, Michelle.
Bye, darling. Bye, Hazel. It's nice to
No, I'm just asking a question if that's okay. So I'm almost finished the 200-hour. I have my final exam now, so it's been brilliant. Deb was my mentor and I've gotten on really well. So I was talking to Rachel in relation to the yoga therapy. I wasn't aware about the year experience, but if you do the yoga therapy, we'll say, does that qualify you for a 300-hour then as well? Will you receive your 300 hours, so you'd be technically 500-hour with, we'll say, the yoga therapy qualification? Is that correct?
So you would first, module 1 is the 300-hour.
Okay. Yeah.
I recommend to people who want to do that, and Hazel, like I said, we can look at it and talk about it if it's something you really want to do. I think I can twist Anna Pilar's arm to, make an exception. But we recommend during COVID that you register for the 300-hour because it will save you like $3,000. Okay. So register for the 300-hour and then you'll come into module 2 of the yoga therapy program. And then you have to do module 2 and 3. Well, module 2 is the coursework. Module 3 is your practicum, and the practicum is where you live in a clinical setting. So you're in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just come back to Ireland. I'll just
come and visit.
So basically what we would do is we would work with you to find a hospital or a clinical office or a therapist or somebody to work with to fulfill your practicum hours. So the only thing that you would have to do, like stateside, if COVID miraculously goes away, would be things in module 2.
Okay, that's cool. So I'd say my best bet moving forward really would be to register with the 300-hour and just to kind of go from there rather than like going straight in. Thank you so much for the clarification.
Yeah, it's really cool that we can do this because normally we can't, right? Even though yoga therapy doesn't care if you register with Yoga Alliance, most people want to. So, and the in-person training is more expensive. I mean, still accessible, but it's more expensive. So since all this is going on, I just recommend people do the online.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for everything. I love the course.
Oh, we are so glad. Thanks, Hazel. Any other questions, guys?
If I register for the 300, I haven't finished the 200. I'm almost there, but I'm also doing some grading online next week. Would it be okay? And then I can start the program once I complete those couple of things.
Yes.
I'm just a little nervous, but I'm also excited that I'm in the yoga program. So I thank you because I called you. I don't know if you remember like a year ago or so, because I live in El Paso area. And actually my daughter is in UT Austin now. And I was even looking into jobs over there to see if, since she pays for the dorm, I said to her, maybe we can just get an apartment or something. And I was really thinking about it, you know, because it would be great. That way I can get a little change and move that. And I was even thinking about, because a lot of my friends have asked me, because I've been in yoga almost 4 years, and I'm a Spanish teacher. And I was thinking it would be great to put even yoga things in Spanish, you know.
Yeah, we have a version of training that is in a very bad Spanish. I won't even sell it.
Well, let me know. I'm a Spanish teacher. I'm a native Spanish speaker. I grew up in between the two countries.
Well, we
let
would,
me know, and I would be willing to. I love translating too.
yeah, we have videos even of one of our students who is fluent in Spanish. She did the videos for it, and every once in a while, if somebody really wants to do it, we'll let them do it with the caveat that I have no idea if that grammar is even remotely like right at all. But it's interesting though, there's only been 2 or 3 people who have done it and they said, no, it was great. Everything was great. And I'm like, I don't know if you're just telling me that or what, but anyway.
If I have a chance, I would be able to do that. I would love to. I like translating. I love languages. I took some French, Italian, but my strength is English and Spanish. Those are the ones.
Awesome.
I teach high school for a living, Spanish high school.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it.
I happen to say their science, Andrea, because I don't know. I'm learning about technology. I'm Angelica, but it's my daughter's login, so I have to go and log into my stuff.
No problem. No problem. Thanks, Angelica. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. That way I can get into this program, because I was like, how can I afford this too?
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions, guys?
How does your online, I always have a lot of questions. I'm that person in the class. So what do you do in the online mentoring, and are you pretty booked up right now with all your clients, like in the online mentoring and yoga teacher mentoring? I saw that as another options on the website.
I've never actually put any time or energy or money behind it because I always give it away free. I know I'm going to get like, somebody's going to text me and be like, come on, Michelle, you have to start charging for things. But I just really like working with people, and I just have been really blessed. So, I mean, I would be fine to talk to you about it, but I've always just done it for free. And we've never put money behind it, like advertising money behind it, because I just always do it for free. So.
I would love to work with you. I don't know what the pricing is, but I send you an email about asking for a time for next week. So maybe we can chat more then.
Sounds good, B. I would love that. I would love that. Yeah, I do. So my style when I work with private clients is I basically give them 7 or 6 free sessions. And it doesn't matter if they like walked off the street or if they're like in my training. I'll give you 6 free sessions. And then after that, if you still want to work with me, then you can pay me. And the reason I do it, it's my karma yoga. It's the way I give back. But you know, the reason I do that is I don't want to foster dependency. I want to give people the tools they need and let them go. But that's being said, I've had a few people that'll get through their 6 and they're like, no, now I'm ready to pay you. And I'm like, okay, fine. I guess I'll do that. So, but yeah.
I had another question on the Spanish one, because I was telling a lady that used to go with me to yoga, and she's at home. And I told her, would you be part of the recording, because I'm doing this? And she said, it's in English. Well, you know, she doesn't know that much English. And she asked me, do you have it available that I could tell her about it?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to it. We would have to probably have a conversation offline, but you know, I wouldn't be opposed to it, especially if she could work with you. Because right now, I mentioned this the other day, or I mentioned this rather in the video I posted last night, but we just started last week offering a scholarship for Black wellness, which as a result, I've hired several new mentors to support that, we weren't expecting it to be so popular, to be honest with you. And it's really popular. And so I think I'm going to hire another like 5 or 6 mentors in the next week. We may even do that for a couple of weeks just to deal with the volume, which is awesome. Like, I'm so excited about it. And that's that's another value that I really have in terms of business values, is I want to create jobs. And so we're doing that. We are creating jobs, which is fantastic. But because of that, I sort of have to make sure that I am able to handle that bandwidth there before I start, branching out in another area. So it would be super important to me that any student that's coming in, especially if there's a language barrier, that we have the staff to support them. And I'm totally cool with finding that staff. It's just going to take me a little bit.
I wouldn't mind working with you. That would be great, because trust me, after so many injuries, one of the things that has helped me is yoga.
Good. Well, send me an email. We're taking applications for mentors right now. And once you finish the 200 hour, you're eligible to mentor. What we found is that's super helpful to reinforce your knowledge. So the reason we do that is because, think about it like this. You go through the course the first time for you, and then you get paid to go through it multiple other times. And every time you teach it, you learn it more and more and more and more and more. So when I first dreamt this idea up 4.5 years ago, I was like, wouldn't it be cool for moms who have babies and can't get out to the studio? They can teach yoga from home. And everybody laughed at me and thought I was crazy. And I'm like, yes, this is the way we need to do it. And now during COVID, I have employed more Austin yoga teachers than any other studio in Austin, because I have worked for them. The caveat is you have to have gone through with training with me, because it's really hard to come in and not have gone through it, right? And so we have a few mentors that have just done the 300 hour. And so they don't mentor the 200 hour because they haven't been through it. They don't know the content, right? You have to know the content, but I'm all for it, man. I really think that, the more I continue to uplift, the more we will continue to grow. And if we have this growth mentality and our mindset is that we're here to provide jobs and to help people use their yoga outside of a studio, I think that we can't lose. Yeah.
I really like that idea, what you said, because now that I've been teaching Spanish for like 11, almost 12 years. I do the same because it reinforces what I know, which it really, really helps.
Sure.
I've done some of the yoga moves in my classroom. They're high school kids, and they like it. They wanted some more. Okay, teach us. I'm like, no, I got to teach you Spanish, or they're going to tell me, what are you doing?
Yeah, totally. Any other questions, guys? Anything at all? It doesn't even have to be related to today's topics.
I wanted to ask, is all the information going to be available on Teachable after things come offline still? So like we have to be finished with it, but like we can still get everything?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to ask was the other smaller courses that are available like online that we can purchase. Are those things like the continuing education kind of ones, are they in the same kind of concept as the being done by September 30th deadline, or can we get those and do those as extras like anytime?
So are you in the 300 right now?
No, I'm finishing the 200 and then going into the 300.
Okay, so you would pick things that are not included in the 300. So like Christine has a little mini course. It's on the 8-limb path. Or I
actually got that one, and then I started thinking like, oh no, do I need to hurry and finish that?
You don't have to worry. You can hold off on that. That's still gonna, like all those CEUs, as long as they're not part of the 300 hour, you can buy them and use them, and I would hold off on getting deep into those until after you finish training so you can make Yoga Alliance's deadline, but they're not as strict at all when it comes to continuing education requirements. And you're allowed to have, a certain percentage of those can be non-contact hours. So, you can definitely use them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And we just added, so we have the Christine's 8-limbed path. We have a chakra one we just added. We had one for eating recovery, which we have a therapist on staff. I don't know if you guys knew that. And anybody who ever needs therapy, you know, if it's, especially with what's going on right now, we can get you in with Grace, and she is our therapist. Like that, she supports our programs, and she teaches in our yoga therapy program. And she just did one for eating recovery. She and I met that way. We were both working for eating recovery several years ago, and we met, and we've been working together ever since. And she did one on like positive body image. So that's up there. Yeah. Cool. Questions, comments, thoughts? How are you guys enjoying everything so far?
Hi. I have a quick question. I'm totally brand new, just signed up. Today would be like my 3rd day, I think. And I wanted to watch you guys have like Zoom lives that are like from 9 to 3 or something like that, but I couldn't find the link, or maybe I just don't know where to look.
It's in the packet.
It's in that, so in the welcome.
That's how I got here right now. But in the packet link, that's how I ended up here.
Oh, good. So there should be a link for a Google Sheets doc. That Google Sheets doc has all of the links for Zoom meetings. It has all of the links for office hours, and it has every single video that we have on YouTube that's unpublished. And I really wanted to give you guys that because, again, the way that we do this training, the Teachable platform just doesn't have, I mean, it has what you need for like basic understanding, but all this other stuff is what you need to really cultivate your voice as a teacher and, you know, to deepen your practice and all of those things. So we wanted to give you guys access to everything, and we wanted to make sure it was well over 500 hours, and it is. So you guys could literally sit and watch videos. I'm sure you really want to do this, to watch videos for hundreds of hours. But yeah, they're all, you have access to them forever.
Okay, so just the top link then on that sheet.
I believe so. I'm not looking at it. I believe so.
That's okay. I'll try again tomorrow. Thank you.
You're so welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. All right, guys. Any other questions, comments?
Do you have recommendation for mic to use when you're teaching live?
Yeah, I like there's one on Amazon. It's like, I mean, it's like $38, I think. If you put in Amazon wireless headset mic, it'll come up. It's like a flesh colored thing. It's got little loop-de-loops on the ears. You basically put it on like a reverse headband, and then you loop it around your ears, and it just is right there. I love that one. I bought it twice. I'm about to buy it again because it only lasts for about a year before you need a new one. And it's because the receiver has a wire on it. And then, you know, what I do is I have to stick it in my pants. It's just like in the back of my pants, right? I have to stick it in the back of my pants so I can do asana if I'm doing asana, or I can talk and you don't see wires and stuff. Well, after you stick it in there like so many times, the wires get jumbled. And so last time I tried to record something, I got like an hour hatha flow, and like there were periods where the mic didn't pick up. So you know you need to buy a new one when that starts happening, but typically it's really good and it's easy to use with all types of devices.
That's nice to know. 'Cause all I've seen people recommend is like the Rode one, which is like $200 a pop.
Yeah, no, this is easy. All right, any other questions, guys? I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here. I'll go ahead and let you guys get on with your day, but you know, I'm always here. I'm always available. If you need anything, let me know, okay?
Thanks, Michelle. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
You're so welcome, guys. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Enjoy Christine tomorrow.
Yay!